All right, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples of books that I would not buy right now. And the first book is on screen. It is Spider-Man, specifically from the 2022 series. And more specifically than that, we are talking about issue number 7. And more specifically than that, we are talking about the Ramos variant, which you see here on screen. This is a book that I would not buy right now. I would not touch this book. And for those that don't know, this book is the first appearance of Spider-Boy 2. It is also, I do believe, the first cover appearance of Spider-Boy 2. And there's a lot of excitement around this character. I also have to point out that there is a reason why I'm using Go Collect. I'm using Go Collect because I'm specifically saying you might not want to buy these books, these graded books, right? So maybe if you can find some of these books raw for a lesser price, the numbers might make sense there. But in the case of this video, I am offering up these cautionary notes around graded copies of these comics, which is why I use Go Collect as a reference, because they have graded comic values. But again, a cool book, no doubt about it. But I want you to notice a couple of things here as we look at some of the numbers for this comic. And I want to blow this up for you guys. There are 1,863 total Universal Blue Label copies of Spider-Boy 2's first appearance and also cover. There are a total of almost 2,000 total graded copies of this comic out there. So a lot of graded copies in a relatively short period of time. This is a relatively new book, but look at this. 9.8s. There are 1,746 total copies of this comic out there. When you drill into the data, what you see is that number represents 94% of the total Universal Blue Labels. 94% of the total Universal Blue Labels out there are a 9.8. That is a lot of copies. I like Modern Comics. I think Modern Comics should be a 9.8 or as close to a 9.8 as possible. But the challenge is when the vast majority of those copies are a 9.8, the book, in my mind, loses a little bit of its luster because it's not exactly a rare book at all. I want to see a much smaller number of 9.8s, especially if I'm going to be paying real money for something. And what's interesting, again, there's a lot of interesting things. When you look at this book, you see from the graph, the value of this book has been on the decline. In April, this book was going on average for $173. As of May, this book is going for $120. My guess is that the value of this book will continue to decline as FOMO wears off. And here's the thing. If you wait, if you're patient, you could pick this book up for less money, potentially. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but potentially you can pick this book up for less money if you even want it in a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Be patient. The value potentially will come down. And if you look at this, if you look at the numbers, the most recent price for this book on basically the same day went anywhere from $135 to $105. That is a pretty big swing. All of these were fixed prices. Yeah, all of those were fixed prices, all on eBay. A lot of people sending this book in to get it graded and turn it around and selling the book. Do not catch the FOMO brick. Do not catch it. If you want this book, if you really think that Spider-Boy 2 has some long-term potential, you might want to wait or pick up a raw copy. Pick up a raw copy, maybe roll the dice that you're going to get a 9.8, 9.6 high-grade copy. Do not catch the brick right now. And again, this is not to take anything away from what Humberto Ramos or Mark Bagley or Dan Slott are attempting to do with Spider-Boy. I read issue 1. I haven't read issue 7, but I started reading issue 1 and maybe even 2. It's not a bad read, but for 100 and some odd bucks, I don't think that that is what I want to sign up for just yet. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our next example. And the next example is definitely an older book. It is an older book, and it is a good book, and it is one that I have in the collection. It is Green Lantern issue number 87. This is the second appearance of Guy Gardner and the first appearance of my man, John Stewart. And this book is hot right now because of the Green Lantern True Detective style show that's going to be coming out at some point in the future. I think that is the reason why this book is hot. And now contrast this book to what we just saw. There are a total of 1,815 Universal Blue Label copies of this comic from 1971. A total of 2,100 or so total copies. That includes all labels that are out there. This book from 1971 is basically the equivalent of what we just looked at with Spider Boy's first appearance from like last week, right? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about. Night and day difference in terms of the I guess maybe the quality of the character, the quality of the book, the duration of the book actually being out there, the fan base. Like pick a variable. I would say that Green Lantern 87 is potentially a better book all the way around. But again, not a book that I would pick up right now, partially because, again, things that are attached to movies and TV shows, for whatever reason, right or wrong, the values tend to go up. I would say you might not want to pick this book up right now. Now, what's interesting is that as you go down the list here, we don't have a ton of 30-day average data in this very last column. But if you look in every single situation, the 30-day average for this comic is higher than the 1-year average. It is higher for the 8.0. It is higher for the 7.0. It is higher for the 5.5 and the 5.0. Oh no, I misled you there. It is actually lower for the 5.5. That is incorrect. Lower for the 5.0. I was on a roll here, but clearly have to revise that. Holds true for the 4.0. Maybe they did an update since I looked at this last, which could happen. But the point here is that generally speaking, this book is going for more money now, just roughly speaking, on average, than it was a year ago, potentially because of the excitement around Jon Stewart. So again, the timing may not be ideal for picking this book up. Let's look at a reasonably priced one. Let's look at an 8.0. The 8.0 has a fair market value of $800 at present. 1 year ago, it was going for $754. 90 days ago, it was going for $775. So the book is definitely on the increase here. And you can see again how this plays out graphically over here. Let's toggle that off. And you can just see graphically how this book had a high watermark back in August of 2021. It had a little bit of a fall off, a little bit of a blip, a little bit of a fall off to reach a low, a near term low in October of 2022 to sit at about $600. And now this exact same book at an 8.0, of which there are 181 on the census here, this book has now gone up $200 to have an average price 30-day at $800. Again, not to take anything away from this book, but look at this. This would have been a great time to pick this book up at an 8.0, $600. Maybe not so much here just a few days before at $925, but that was a smoking price at the end of 2022 on Heritage, man. $600. We'd have to look at the numbers to see what the final price was with the buyer's premium and all that kind of stuff, but that does not look like a terrible deal. Again, great book, but maybe now isn't necessarily the time to pick it up. Let's bounce back and let's look at another example. That was an 8.0. Let's look at, let's see what the next grade is here. Let's look at a 5.5. This one, let's see what the data looks like on this one. Yeah, it too is starting to recover and bounce up just a little bit. Not that long ago, this book was going for $264 in March of this year, and as of May, it is now going for $400. Not a ton, not a huge jump up, right? I mean, it's material, right? Don't get me wrong, but it's not a huge jump up. But again, what happens on the other side of the movie or TV show, whatever the heck they're releasing? What is going to happen to the value of this book? If the writer's strike continues to go a little bit longer, could you potentially pick this book up because of that delay? Are people's attention span going to be diverted to other things, thus thus allowing you to maybe pick this book up a little cheaper than what it's going for at its 30-day average of $400. It's possible. It's possible. And again, sometimes patience goes a long way. So wanted to make sure that I showed you guys that example. I want to check out a couple more here. I normally only do 3, but I think we're going to do 4 in this video. This is Web of Spider-Man issue number 18. Some Ben Reilly action, Scarlet Spider stuff going on with this book. I have a couple of copies of this in the 100K collection. I've been looking at this book multiple times trying to figure out, do I have a 9.8 worthy book to send in? I don't think so. I think I'm probably closer to a 9.6. But again, I don't know that I would buy this book right now. And I think this book's value is being pushed up because I think Ben Reilly's going to appear in the Spider-Verse animated movie that's going to be coming out. And I think that that is what's pushing the value of this book up just a little bit. Again, a cool book. Again, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers here. 2,100 copies, universal out there, a total of 2,200 copies for this book released in 1994. Contrast that to Spider-Man, what was it, issue number 7, the Ramos variant with basically the same number of books on the census, but look at the census count for the 9.8. This 9.8 only has 277 copies, which might be why the value is where it is, right? And let's look at it. Let's see what percent that is. Yeah, it's 13%. It's 13% of the total universal blue labels out there are a 9.8. And again, when you look at the value of this book, you can see how it plays out here on the graph. I do like a good chart. You can see the high water mark for this book back in September was basically $1,000. It fell off dramatically in January of this year to $470. And it has started a slow creep up to basically be where did it go? Went from 470 up to basically $700 is the average. I'm guessing the chart and the table are a little out of date. The chart shows 699 and the 30-day average on the right there is 742. So maybe again, the updating is happening right now. A good book. There is no doubt about it. But again, look at the values. Look at somebody paid $990. Somebody paid $990 for this book not that long ago. And then the very next book, $700. The one after that, $660. Again, this is a book that I think is a cool book. There's no doubt about it. I just don't know that now is the right time to pick it up. I think on the other side of the Spider-Verse movie could be a good time to pick it up because you might be watching this graph drop back down to maybe where it was at the beginning of the year. And we've spoken about this before. A lot of people are like, I think the bottom could continue to fall out. I think values could continue to drop. When you look at the graphs, it is only in hindsight that you actually see where the bottom might have been. So this idea of timing the market, getting it at its lowest price, I don't think that you can actually do that. Again, the time to have bought this book might have been in January 2023 when the book was actually going for $470, which is basically where it was in September of 2021. That's why the data is your friend, and that's why trying to time the market doesn't necessarily work. And I'm only going to show the 9.8 here. Again, I consider this a modern book. I think that you should try to get modern books as close to a 9.8 as possible. You'll have to dig into some of the other numbers or the other grades and numbers to see whether it might make sense to also hold off on these books. But generally speaking, a lot of times when I identify these books, what I say for the higher grade typically holds true all the way through, but I would definitely encourage you guys to dig a little bit deeper. So the next book that I want to show on the last book is this one right here. This book hit, I think it was the CGC. I think it was the CGC countdown. Maybe it was the CBCS. I honestly can't recall. It was one of them. It was CBCS. Hit the CBCS countdown hard. There were a lot of copies of this simple cover in a few different formats that found their way to CBCS for grading. And I just think that now is not the time to buy this book. I do not think that now is the time to buy Superman issue number 1, specifically the big time collectibles blue edition of this comic. This book dropped February of this year. It dropped. And again, you can look here, you see that there are 427 copies of this comic that are Universal Blue Label, a total of 439 across all labels. There appear to be 11 signed copies and at least one qualified label out there. I don't know what that's about. Maybe it's a signature that someone didn't have witnessed by CGC. Maybe that's potentially it. But you look here at the 9.8. There are 288 total copies of this book at a 9.8 on the census, which represents the top 98%. The top 98% of what is out there is represented right here. And so I may have stated that incorrectly earlier in the video. I'll have to correct that. That is my bad. But again, you can look here and you can see what's happening to the value of this comic. Started out $250 in March, dropped down to, let me take that off, dropped down to $170 and now sits at $161. My guess is that the value of this book will continue to go down as the FOMO wears off. That is my guess, is that it will continue to decline. And if you want this book, you might actually be able to pick this book up at a more favorable price later on. But I want to back up here, and I never look at 9.8s, but we're going to look at it here. And the reason being, there are 131 9.9s on the census. If you were to get this book, you might actually need to get the 9.9. And I say that because typically there is a tiny number of 9.8s. And thus the bolus really sits with, if you will, at the 9.8. That's the grade that is abundant for people to be able to get. It's the grade that you can actually find out there if you happen to be looking for it. People aren't selling 9.9s all that often. But with 131 9.9s, I feel like if you get this book, you might have to get the 9.9. I think you might have to get the 9.9 and skip the 9.8. But let's look at it. Let's look at what this book is doing. Again, same thing here. The value of the 9.9 has continued to decline. It has dropped from $402 down to $376. So not as big of a drop. But again, this is the top 30%, top 31% of copies that are out there are a 9.9. Again, if I were to get this book, I think I would have to take a really hard look at that 9.9 and ask myself, the future value of this comic, where is it going to be? Is it going to be in what could be considered an abundant number of 9.9s or an abundant number of 9.8s? And it might be with the 9.9. I don't know. So, well, I just throw that out for consideration. So again, all of these books, I think, are all good books, right? This isn't to take away from these comics in any way, shape, or form. It's really to throw it out there to say, you want to pause, you want to think, and you want to spend your money wisely. And sometimes not spending your money right away on these comics is actually the right answer, because potentially you can get them at a much better price a little bit later by being patient. With that said, we're going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, I definitely want to encourage you to leave your thoughts behind. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care. If you haven't already done so, I want to invite you to check out a quality publication that I am releasing called Isolation. Our issue 4 is available right now as a Kickstarter on SWOLDIERpublishing.com. Link in the description.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yo. Should you practice art, or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master, the one that's more than a rapper, the one that's an educator, the one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts, he's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan, straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations, synergy and combinations. You fly and we waiting, Indian style and the gold.